Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Kyrgyz leader calls for trial of ousted president.
As far as Israel goes, I'm not going to comment.
Obama says Israel and others should join nukes treaty. And Lebanese soccer government style. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
U.S. Assistant Secretary of State said that his country is ready to help Kyrgyzstan get out of its current crisis. He made these statements during a press conference held with Rosa Otunbayeva, the head of Kyrgyzstan's provisional government. Otunbayeva said that ousted President Kurmanbek Bakiyev must be tried because of what he did to the Kyrgyz people. Meanwhile, Russian President Dmitry Medvedev warned that Kyrgyzstan might turn into a second Afghanistan if its security situation does not improve.
Political ambiguity, an uncertain faith for the ousted president, a difficulty in reaching a peaceful settlement to the crisis in Kyrgyzstan, and 1 week of disturbances have heightened Washington's concerns over the fate of its military base in that country. The U.S. sent Assistant Secretary of State Robert Blake to Bishkek to assure the Kyrgyz government that a strong ally is standing behind it.
Secretary Clinton sent me to
Kyrgyzstan to support the efforts of the interim government to re-establish democracy, set a timetable for a new constitution, and conduct new elections in Kyrgyzstan. The U.S. is ready to help, and we discussed the different venues in which we can provide support.
Kyrgyzstan is on the brink of civil war, and it might turn into a second Afghanistan. This was Russian President Dmitry Medvedev's warning during his visit to the Brookings Institute in the U.S. Medvedev also warned that the country might be divided between the north, where the provisional authorities will be in control, and the south, the stronghold of ousted President Kurmanbek Bakiyev, who was toppled by a protest campaign during which dozens of people were killed.
We
are very aware of the implications of a civil war. If a civil war erupts, it will attract extremists and terrorists. Areas of conflict often provide a suitable environment for extremist groups. We are worried that Kyrgyzstan may turn into Afghanistan.
Medvedev talked about the fate of the American military base in Kyrgyzstan, saying that Moscow will not interfere in the affairs of a sovereign country.
We must prepare the people, and then we can establish a viable government. Also, some officials must take responsible decisions in regards to their political fate. These decisions must be motivated, not by their own political ambitions, but by their responsibility toward the Kyrgyz people.
The Russian position on the Kyrgyz crisis became clear as Medvedev implied that Bakiyev must accept the reality and meet the demands of the provisional authorities. It seems that ousted President Bakiyev has realized the regaining power is impossible, especially considering the recent political developments, the threats that were made by the provisional authorities, namely that they will arrest him if he does not surrender and after diplomatic immunity was stripped from him. Now, his safety and the safety of his family are his main concerns.
I'm not attached to the presidency. I did not say that I will not give up the presidency under any circumstances. All I'm demanding is an agreement to assure the safety of my family and myself, and perhaps reach an agreement on some other issues, most importantly, Kyrgyzstan's stability. Then we can talk about giving up power.
The demand that Bakiyev be tried or leave the country will not solve the problems of Kyrgyzstan. However, this might be the first step towards reaching a peaceful solution to the conflict. Abdelkader Belhaj, BBC.
U.S. President Barack Obama is hoping that Israel will join the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT.
Obama's statement, which was issued while answering a question at the end of the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington, was not seen by Tel Aviv as a shift of U.S. position on Israel's policy of nuclear ambiguity.
أفلح سؤال صحفي في أن يلفت الأنظار إلى البرنامج.
A journalist's question has successfully drawn attention to the Israeli nuclear program. This prompted U.S. President Barack Obama to hope that Israel signs the NPT.
الانتشار النووي.
As far as Israel goes, I'm not going to comment.
As far as Israel goes, I'm not going to comment on their program. We have encouraged all countries to become part of the NPT. Therefore, there's no contradiction. Whether we are talking about Israel or any other country, we think that becoming part of the NPT is important.
ما قاله أوباما بحذر عن إسرائيل لم يكن مزعجا للمسؤولين.
What Obama has cautiously said about Israel was not viewed by officials in Tel Aviv as being hostile. On the contrary, the Israelis have welcomed Obama's commitment to their policy of nuclear ambiguity. Israel does not believe that Obama's latest comments constitute a shift in the U.S. position regarding the policy of nuclear ambiguity that Israel has adopted for decades. Based on this policy, Israeli officials refrain from issuing public statements about their country's nuclear capability and refrain from conducting any nuclear tests. In return, Washington refrains from mounting pressure on Israel over the latter's nuclear program. The Israeli Prime Minister had announced that he wouldn't attend Washington's Nuclear Security Summit in order to avoid any discussion of Israel's nuclear program. Netanyahu expressed fear over the participation of several Muslim countries, including Egypt and Turkey, which said that they will raise the issue during the nuclear summit. However, this didn't happen. An Israeli envoy at the summit said that Turkey and Egypt didn't openly criticize Israel. The Turkish Prime Minister opted to raise the issue during a press interview outside the conference hall.
Joining us now in the studio to discuss the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington is author of the book Nuclear Ambiguity on Israeli Nuclear Policy, Professor Yoel Cohen, who is also the chairman of Ariel University Center's School of Communications. Professor Cohen, good evening.
Good evening.
Now, of course, the focus of the summit in Washington is ostensibly how to prevent terrorists or criminals from gaining nuclear weapons or the materials to produce them. Is anything concrete going to emerge from the summit?
Well, it's certainly created, shall we say, the correct mood and international atmosphere to pursue various and different dimensions of the nuclear danger which the world has been facing for many, many years. Indeed, over the last couple of weeks, there have been some important decisions. For example, the United States, the change in the US, shall we say, nuclear doctrine announced a week and a half ago by President Obama that countries which sign NPT will not be the target of any nuclear attack by the United States. And secondly, the US-Russian agreement to reduce their own nuclear stocks by a third. And thirdly, Ukraine's decision to get rid of all its enriched nuclear, uranium. So this is creating the right atmosphere for some important decisions. And I would say that in all respect, Professor, to President Obama, that he has found an issue, namely nuclear security, which is acceptable, which is a common international interest, which nobody has any complaints to sit and talk together. And it is very important where you have a multilateral situation like an international conference to find a subject of which is acceptable to all the 46 countries which are participating in the conference.
Now, Professor Cohen, there is perceived that there was going to be a great deal of pressure put on Israel at this summit, and in general there is pressure on Israel to go on the record about its own nuclear stockpile. In fact, you're an expert, you've written the book Nuclear Ambiguity. Do you think that Israel's position on nuclear weapons is something that the world will accept, or should Israel just sign the non-proliferation treaty?
Well, the world has certainly been pressing, the world, minus the Western community, has been pressing Israel for many, many years to go public with its reported nuclear arsenal. On the other hand, the Western community, including the United States, well understands Israel's philosophy that until matters of territory, whether it's the Palestinians or beforehand the creation of peace with Egypt, which required Israel to withdraw from territory, until all that is solved and there's a peace, a real sense of peace in the Middle East, and that Israel is a full bilateral partner in the region, only then where should pressure be brought on Israel to also discuss the nuclear issue. Because in other words, the nuclear issue, the nuclear capability is an umbrella which enables Israel to make difficult withdrawals from territory, and the Western world, including President Obama, also understands this. So in that sense, the Western community is not pressing Israel and will not be pressing Israel next month when the issue of NPT comes up for renewal, in contrast to Egypt, which certainly sees the Dimona project as a potential, shall we say, threat, and Turkey is also planning to raise the matter in the conference today and tomorrow.
Exactly. Now, I did want to ask you about the upcoming conference 1 month from now. It will take place in New York City. This is going to be a 5-year review conference on the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. What can we expect as far as Israel is concerned, either from Egypt and Turkey or others? Briefly.
Well, there was a proposal in the previous conference in 1995 to create a nuclear-free zone in the Middle East, and they're planning to vote on it. And obviously, therefore, the question of Israel and giving up its nuclear capability will come up. So Israel is and has, ever since the Iranian threat has become center stage in international relations, has been playing a low posture, which also therefore explains the decision of Prime Minister Netanyahu not to attend the conference in Washington today.
Jordan has said an Israeli decision to deport tens of thousands of Palestinians from the West Bank is a flagrant violation of international law that would hinder peace efforts. The government said in a statement that the Israeli order was illegal and illegitimate and constitutes a blatant violation of international law. The expulsion order, it said, runs contrary to Israeli obligations as the occupying power and demanded that Israel cease provocations and all unilateral measures. It said peace and stability in the region could only come through a comprehensive regional peace and the setting up of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state on pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. The statement urged the world community to act swiftly and hold Israel accountable for its deeds, which challenge international consensus that solving the conflict is an international interest. Condemnation of the Israeli move also came from the Senate, which said it was a continuation of the ethnic cleansing and expansionist policy, which is a gross violation of international resolutions and the values of peace, justice, and freedom. The Senate urged Arab, regional, and international parliaments, as well as peace-loving people, to stand up to Israel's sinister designs aimed at evicting Palestinians from their lands. It also urged the government to rally word support for the Palestinians and commended efforts by His Majesty the King in support of the Palestinians' legitimate rights, foremost of which is statehood. The Israeli order, which will allow for deportation of tens of thousands of Palestinians, has been decried as the biggest ethnic cleansing campaign since the occupation began in 1967. Human rights groups strongly condemn the decision, and Palestinians say Israel is acting in disregard of signed peace accords and international conventions. This Reuters report highlights some of the reactions.
Human rights activists say new orders from the Israeli military can make almost any Palestinian liable for expulsion from the occupied West Bank. The rules allow deportation of what Israel calls infiltrators, anyone who does not hold an Israeli permit to reside there. Lawyer Elad Kahana.
These are amendments of two existing military orders, which will come into effect on this Tuesday, the 13th. Basically, they defined as an infiltrator anyone who stays in the West Bank and doesn't have a permit from the military occupation. Nowadays, the existing definition of an infiltrator defines that it's someone who enters the West Bank illegally from an enemy state, and the new definition will pass all these three elements and define anyone who is currently in the West Bank as an infiltrator unless he or she has a permit.
Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Erekat said the order could have the effect of making thousands of Palestinians criminals in their own homes and undermines the peace process.
This is a declaration that Oslo does not exist, that international law does not exist, that the Fourth Geneva Convention does not exist. And that's the gravity of the situation. The gravity of the situation is that such actions and such behaviors and such military orders are an official declaration of the death of Oslo and the peace process.
The Ghazel family is one of the many families at risk from the new law. Abdulrazak Ghazel has visited his family in the Gaza Strip 6 times in 14 years, and the last time his permit only allowed him to stay for just 4 hours.
As a human being living here, I have very few natural rights. I don't want to continue to exist in this place as a body, while a Jew who comes from Russia or Africa has rights that await him before he even arrives.
The rules allow rapid deportation within 72 hours, and appeals are to be decided within 8 days by military judges. Israeli authorities say the new rules will not bring mass deportation.
According to the Iranian official news agency, Tehran has filed a formal complaint with the United Nations against U.S. President Barack Obama on charges of nuclear blackmail. Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said that Tehran is willing to hold a dialogue with all the different sides, provided that its nuclear rights are preserved.
Iran's nuclear program has become an excuse for them. Fortunately, we have reached a point of no return, which mandates us to continue working on our nuclear program, and they do realize that. We are willing to talk and cooperate with them, provided that our rights and dignity are respected. This will benefit both sides. We are not seeking a confrontation with them.
In an exclusive statement issued to Al Arabiya channel, Al-Amin Mahmoud, a senior member of the Sudanese National Congress Party led by Hassan al-Turabi, accused an election observer at the 9th district of Umbada in Durman of election fraud. Mahmoud said that the fact that an election worker was left alone inside a ballot safekeeping room raises suspicion.
Yes, we are suspicious of this action. Why was he left alone in the record room, which houses the ballots? We will not be able to verify the story until the employee is questioned. No one is supposed to go into that room. The room was locked at a specific hour last night, and it was to remain locked until 8 a.m. this morning.
In response, Yassin Muhammad Ahmed, the employee accused of committing fraud, said that he's being intentionally targeted in the case.
First, they accused me directly of fraud. I don't know exactly what they are charging me with. I tried to ask them for clarification, but they failed to provide any evidence. They told me that I was working on behalf of certain groups to defraud the elections. Another polling employee was also accused of committing election fraud. They are accusing us of fraud.
Meanwhile, Sudanese officials said that travel and transport limitations are preventing hundreds of thousands of Southerners from casting their ballots in the country's elections, which were extended until Thursday evening.
The voting process was overshadowed by technical and administrative errors similar to those cited in the first 2 days of voting. This prompted the National Election Commission, or NEC, to extend the voting process by 2 additional days. On this third day of voting, the streets of the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, seemed to be calm, which is not a reflection of voter turnout that was surprisingly low. In addition to the low turnout, some of the election districts didn't have enough polling booths.
I got to the voting center at 8:45 and was told that the polling boxes have not arrived. We are still waiting.
I don't know what's going on here. What is delaying the polling boxes? They aren't telling us anything.
The frequent complaints of Sudanese citizens have overshadowed the election scene. The NEC acknowledged that some mistakes were made during the voting process. Observers believe that extending the vote by 2 additional days was not the right decision.
I believe that the decision to extend voting by 2 days was not the right decision. They should have extended the elections for only 24 hours, which is sufficient enough to correct the mistakes committed by the NEC. The extension has directly reflected on voter turnout, as some decided not to vote.
According to the NEC, voter turnout has exceeded 50% in some Sudanese states. The NEC suspended polling in 9 state districts and 6 national districts across Sudan. The Election Commission added that elections will resume in these states within 60 days. Despite the political polarization witnessed between the NEC on one side and political parties on the other, the series of Sudan's elections is nearing its final episode. That specific day will be the day of the results.
On the 7th anniversary of the American invasion of the Iraqi capital Baghdad, Secretary General of the Association of Muslim Scholars in Iraq, Dr. Harith al-Dari, wrote the Iraqi people an open letter. He reiterated that in the past few years, the occupation has been subjected to a great deal of losses at the hands of the resistance, which is foiling its projects and plans. In addition, the occupation is losing its credibility around the world.
الذي مني بخسائر فادحة للغاية بشرية ومالية وأخلاقية كانت كفيلة.
The past 7 years have been tough on the occupiers. They have been subjected to very heavy losses at the human, material, and moral levels.
وحمله على التفكير في الانسحاب ومن ثم الإعلان عن ذلك.
These losses have foiled their regional plans and damaged their credibility around the world and forced them to think about withdrawing.
الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وحلفاؤها بحق العراق وشعبه.
Countries around the world have started to realize the magnitude of the sin that was committed by the U.S. and its allies against Iraq and its people.
ولم تعد الإدارة الأمريكية قادرة على إقناع العالم.
Some have expressed regret for contributions they made in support of this failed project.
بذلك كثيرا من الدول لسنوات. لقد انتقد عدد من الدوائر السياسية.
For years, the U.S. has fooled many countries, but it can no longer convince the world that what it is doing in Iraq is right.
بها الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وبريطانيا لإقناع الشعوب الغربية.
Many Western media and officials have criticized American and British propaganda aimed at convincing Western societies that the war in Iraq has achieved its objective.
البريطانية التي أكدت مؤخرا أن تلك المحاولات.
For example, the British newspaper The Guardian has recently reiterated that the occupation is trying to save face and improve its ugly image.
أمام أفظع عمل إجرامي للغرب في العصور.
The invasion of Iraq is the most horrible Western crime against humanity committed in recent history.
الحرب على العراق لا تلاقي ترحيبا ولا دعما عراقيا لها.
The Guardian added that the war in Iraq is not welcomed or supported by Iraqis. Rather, according to polls, Iraqis do not accept the American and British military presence in their country and want these forces to leave.
The Iraqi resistance continues its heroic operations. Ansar al-Sunnah claimed responsibility for launching a missile toward the occupation military base in Kirkuk. It was a direct hit, and the resistance forces peacefully withdrew afterward. The Rafedin army claimed responsibility for launching 2 Leningrad missiles against an American military base near Baghdad airport. There were additional armed resistance operations. A truck carrying food supplies for the occupation soldiers was attacked with an explosive device in southern Baghdad. The truck was damaged and its Nepalese driver was injured. Also, an occupation military convoy was attacked with an explosive device in eastern Bakuba in the center of Diyala province, close to the road that links Balarus to Kenan. Losses among the occupation soldiers are unknown because a security parameter was imposed around the area of the explosion.
Divided by politics, but united by sports. We're referring to Lebanese parliament members and ministers representing different movements and political parties who met on the 35th anniversary of the Civil War for a friendly soccer match, dubbed We Are One Team. This match was not about the ruling majority versus the minority opposition, and except for some Lebanese officials and President Michel Suleiman, who were given front row seats, spectators were prevented from entering the stadium. We leave you with our reporter Elian Shatri.
على المستطيل الأخضر في المدينة الرياضية في بيروت اجتمعوا.
They met on the green soccer field of Beirut Sports City. Representing the colors of the Lebanese flag, one team was dressed in red and the other in white. They are not professional athletes. Rather, they are ministers and parliament members who came together to commemorate the 35th anniversary of the Lebanese Civil War. For security reasons, spectators were not allowed to enter the stadium, except for President Michel Suleiman and some other officials who were given front row seats. Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri was the captain of the red team and played a major role, for which he earned the title of first athlete.
The dark days have passed, and God willing, the coming days will be better for all the Lebanese.
God willing, this good sportsmanship will not be applied only on the soccer field, but also in politics.
The lesson is that no matter how much the Lebanese differ, they must maintain a minimum level of civility between each other.
All of us are on one team with the goal of serving Lebanon and the Lebanese.
25 parliament members and 12 ministers participated in the match.
I think we always play as a team. We never play selfishly. We are convinced by this principle, and we will implement it on the field.
They played 2 games, each lasting 15 minutes. The political players ran, tackled, passed the ball, and tried to score against the other team. The match was refereed by the Lebanese National Soccer Union. What did the referees have to say about a match played by government officials?
This is an opportunity to rule them, at least for half an hour.
The first half of the match ended with no goals, but during the second half, the red team scored 2 goals. The match presented a very significant, harmonious image of Lebanon. The soccer match was held on the 35th anniversary of the Lebanese Civil War and played by government officials with the spirit of sportsmanship. This occasion's importance lies in the opportunity to learn from past lessons. Elian Shatri, Dubai Television from Beirut Sports City.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible from support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news. Read our blog. Get transcripts of past shows and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.